From the Ministry of the Presidency in Georgetown, this is This Week with the President.
Welcome to This Week with the President, a news magazine which provides you with an in-depth look at the policies, programs, and work of Guyana's president. In the highlights this week, President touts total national defense for internal and external security. Government committed to parity and gender equality. Land Rights Commission of Inquiry sworn in, and President says abolition of Indian indentured immigration bequeathed a rich legacy of resilience. Stay with us. While the Ministry of Foreign Affairs remains the first line of defense with regard to external threats, the Guyana Defense Force is critically important to ensuring total national defense, defending the nation's border and maintaining internal security. With this in mind, the head of state and commander of the armed forces has outlined a tripartite approach to dealing with security threats, both internal and external, which would include national defense, regional interdependence, and international assistance. The President, who declared open the Guyana Defense Force's annual officers' conference at Base Camp Ayangana under the theme Effective Transformation for Total National Defense, said that GDF ranks must remain watchful.
Threats might arise, however, from elements who wish to undermine internal security. Reckless remarks about an uprising and provocative calls for the mobilization of foot soldiers have the potential to rip apart the fragile fabric of social cohesion.
The Commander-in-Chief noted that in spite of Guyana's extensive borders, complex terrain, and limited infrastructure in the hinterland, which makes deployment extremely difficult, the GDF and citizens at large must remain vigilant, particularly since the green state transition on which the country has embarked could give rise to illegal activities such as pollution of waterways and damage of protected areas.
The force therefore shares responsibility for exercising guardianship over our flora, our fauna, and our marine and natural resources. The doctrine of total national defense, which our Chief of Staff has explained, consequently, must be based firmly not only on military defense, but also on civil defense and social and environmental defense. These pillars cannot be buttressed by the force alone or even by the government. National defense doctrine must emphasize the importance of every citizen taking personal responsibility for our national patrimony.
Recognizing the GDF's limited human and financial resources and in keeping with the provisions of the Defense Act, the President spoke of the important role which the reserve force can play.
This country is covered largely with forests, and most areas are accessible only by river, many others only by air, but of course, being good soldiers, always by foot. The inadequacy of our hinterland infrastructure, insufficient aerodromes, bridges, highways, and stellings hinders our access and impedes our deployment. And that is one of the reasons why one of the challenges facing the Defense Force is to create an engineer corps which can improve national infrastructure by building aerodromes, bridges, highways, and stellings, not only to improve national development, but also to improve military deployment.
Chief of Staff Brigadier Patrick West said that even the most modern, well-equipped, well-provisioned, and well-trained armed forces in the world are not insulated from change, and that the GDF is no different. As such, he urged ranks under his command to be open to organizational transformation and new technologies as the GDF moves forward. It is the the First Lady of Guyana, Mrs. Granger, who said that a woman's greatest barrier is that they do not recognize their own value and use it to command equal access. And over the years, significant strides have been made in affording women the same rights as their male counterparts. Over the past 2 years, President Granger has upped the ante, actively appointing women in leadership positions and honoring them for their outstanding service to the country, taking steps to ensure that women's contributions are recognized and appreciated.
Guyanese women have moved forward since the presentation of the State Paper on Equality of Women to the National Assembly on the 15th of January 1976. The State Paper, which at that time was described as forward-looking, was aimed, among other things, at making sex discrimination unlawful in employment, recruitment, training, education, and the provision of housing, goods, services, and facilities to the public. That was 41 years ago. Legislation was passed. Discrimination did decline. Political participation did improve. And policies for the promulgation of women's equality were made. Women advanced economically, politically, and socially in our nation.
He has appointed women to leadership positions, including at the helm of the judiciary, conferred more national awards to women than any of his predecessors, and made history when he appointed 3 women as senior counsels. All of this is in addition to legislation and policies that were promulgated with the aim of advancing women of Guyana economically, politically, and socially.
Gender equality must be made a paramount policy of government. Gender parity cannot be achieved in the absence of a more equal society. Enforcement of legislation to protect women, to prevent abuse, and to promote greater equality must be more robust. The disparities between hinterland and coastland, and between rural and urban communities, for example, must be reduced.
One of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals seek to achieve gender equality and empower women and girls, and President Granger assured that Guyana will honor its commitment to empower girls and educate them. In this regard, he outlined 4 key areas that must be addressed. These are empowerment, education, employment, and gender equality.
Gender equality can be achieved mainly by ensuring unimpeded access to education. Education will open opportunities for women and allow them to rise more rapidly to the highest levels of occupations and professions. The surest and quickest means of enhancing the status of women and providing them with greater opportunities for upward mobility is through education.
Equally important is the issue of employment, noting that poor people produce poor children who in turn produce more poor children, a cycle that must be reversed.
It is a vicious cycle of hereditary poverty. The burden of poverty falls heavily on women. The vicious cycle of poverty can be broken in order to create a virtuous cycle of gender equality. Employment is necessary. Jobs must be created to enable poor women to enjoy sustainable incomes and to have a chance of exiting from that cycle of poverty.
The head of state is of the firm belief that all women, whether they work in or out of the home, must be empowered to take on leadership roles and become involved in political decision-making. At the observance of Ghana Day, held earlier this week, President Granger spoke on the importance of women in the home, families, and society, going so far as to describe them as sacred. The head of state has been particularly vocal against the incidents of violence against women.
Women are sacred. Do not abuse women, do not disrespect women. And that is something that you'll understand from David Granger. If we abuse women, we abuse generations to come.
The president said that Guyanese need to do much more research into their own history and that of the Akan people and of modern Ghana if they are to understand the linkage between Guyana and Ghana.
We know in Guyana that many people of African origin came from what is now known as Ghana. Many of our heroes had names which were related to Ghanaian day names. And those names are important. And I asked before, and I'll ask again, that we remember that the Akan people do not have a letter C. There's no letter C. So there is no name like C-U-F-F-Y. It is K-O-F-I. And I think to be authentic, we should realize that there are no C's and there are no Q's. So what we call Kwamina, Q-U-A, is probably K-W. They have a K.
Recognizing that land rights are important, the government of Guyana has established a commission of inquiry to examine and make recommendations to resolve all issues and uncertainties surrounding the individual, joint or communal ownership of lands acquired by freed Africans under claims of Amerindian land titling and any other matter relating to land titling in Guyana. The commissioners are Reverend George Chakasang, the chairman, Mr. David James, Ms. Carol Can James, Professor Rudolph James, Mr. Lennox Caleb, Ms. Paulette Henry, and Ms. Belinda Passad. The commissioners were charged to execute their duties with due diligence as land represents economic stability and cultural, material, and even spiritual identity for some people.
Our people will be able to rely on that land space in order to give them and their children and generations to come a good life. Land is life. And every indigenous community can tell you that land is life. Without land, where will they hunt? Where will they fish? Where will they build?
The President noted that the government has recognized that the issues of land rights is far from settled and as such took the decision to set up the commission.
We decided to take a decision to ensure that our people can live in this land, Guyana, without worrying about their future, without worrying about the security of tenure. Land is a vital economic and social resource in our country. And I'm convinced, the government is convinced, that we have enough land to satisfy all the needs of our people and their children for generations to come.
The head of state said that the establishment of this commission is therefore intended to settle the various controversies which may exist and to ensure that justice is served.
Regrettably, land has become a source of disagreement and discontent. There has been pain. There have been controversies. The establishment of this Lands Commission, therefore, is meant to settle these controversies and to satisfy all of the citizens of our country that we need not fight each other for land, that we will investigate their claims and we will respond to their just demands.
Referencing the indigenous population, which is particularly affected by land rights issues and also hold deep connections to their land, the President said they can now be assured that their rights issues will be examined and dealt with in a fair and just manner. Meanwhile, one of the newly sworn-in commissioners, in an invited comment, said that he will be putting his best foot forward to ensure that the mandate which has been set out is achieved.
Like the President said, there are so many conflict issues that are steeped in history, and this is perhaps an opportunity to bring inquiry and resolution to many of those. And I see my role as bringing a different perspective. There are very many demographics across Guyana. We have Amerindians, we have persons who would have themselves, either directly or through their immediate forebears, have been part of many land conflicts. I come from a different perspective where being unhinged by any of those particular issues, but still having an interest in ancestral lands and ensuring that those are properly and appropriately treated, I think that it's an opportunity to give some added impetus and perspective.
Guyana is celebrating the centenary of the abolition of Indian indentureship. The president said this is a fitting time to pay tribute to the 4 parents of Guyanese of Indian ancestry in recognition of their struggles for a better Guyana.
We got here by the blood and the sweat and the struggle of our 4 parents. Indians were able to turn tragedy, the tragedy of separation from their motherland, into the triumph of settlement in their adopted homeland. They responded to the challenge of indentureship by recreating familiar conditions relevant to sustaining their existence here. They cultivated also respectful relations with other peoples who they found here. Their resilience, the relevance of their customs, and the respectful relations with others remain cornerstones of the Indian quest for integration after the abolition of indentured immigration in 1917.
Addressing a large crowd at a Mailand cultural show held at the tarmac of the Leonora Synthetic Track and Field Facility, organized by the Hindu Swayamsevak Sangha in collaboration with the Guyana Indian Indentureship Abolition Association, the president urged Guyanese of all origins to come together to commemorate this significant milestone.
All Guyanese, not just West Emra, not just Region 3, but all Guyanese should commemorate the centenary of the closure of a dark chapter in our history. This event, this time, this place, and the location here, I believe, is a former sugar plantation, remind us of the value that we all place on human dignity, the value we place on human equality, and the value we place on human liberty. Indentured Indian immigration transformed the culture, the demography, and the political economy of what used to be British Guyana.
The head of state pointed out that indentureship was akin to human trafficking, and if it is still in existence today, those responsible for this oppressive system would have been jailed. He said that the coastline is littered with memorials to the martyrs of riots.
The trafficking in persons, because that is what it was. Trafficking in persons. If they did that today, they'd be charged. The trafficking in persons of Indian origin was a cruel phase in our history, in the history of the world. Indians resisted the abuse. Indians resisted the brutality. Indians resisted the confinement on the plantations. They resisted the oppression and the violence of the sugar plantations.
The 8 decades from 1838 to 1917 saw almost 240,000 Indians arrive in Guyana. The majority, about 70%, opted to remain in Guyana at the end of their indentureship. The president said that the decision to stay and make this part of the world their home allowed the immigration mentality to gradually give way to citizenship identity.
Indians were able to overcome the brutalities of the plantation by virtue of their resilience. They resisted and they persevered. They established villages. They explored avenues of economic freedom off the plantations as soon as their indentures ended. And so did the Africans, so did the Chinese, so did the Portuguese. As soon as they could leave the plantations, they sought freedom and dignified labor. They expanded their own income earning activities in agriculture, in business, in politics, and in the urban professions. The end of Indian immigration saw Indians expanding their presence in all aspects of our country's culture, economy, politics, and social life.
And now we take a look inside the president's diary. From March 2 to 4, President Granger, who is also chairman of the Caribbean community, visited the Bahamas on what he described as an economic mission. During the course of the 3 days, the president visited and participated in several activities, even as he secured the island's support for Guyana in face of the Guyana-Venezuela border controversy. He engaged the Guyanese diaspora in the Bahamas, urging them to invest in their country of birth, particularly in the areas of green tourism, education, and information communication technology.
The visit is largely economic, actually. It's called a state visit, but it's an economic mission. We have been deeply impressed by the development of the Bahamas, particularly in the financial and tourism sectors, under Prime Minister Christie, and he's a member of the Caribbean community, and I am chairman of the Caribbean community this year, this semester. I must resort to student language. This is my semester. But there's no doubt about the preeminence of the Bahamian economy in terms of finance and tourism. And I have come with my Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Carl Granger, Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Noel Holder, and Minister of Business, who also has responsibility for tourism, Mr. Dominic Gaskin. And the four of us together are leading this economic mission to learn from Bahamas. I think you have been a splendid example to the rest of the Caribbean community.
Later, he was the guest of honor at the tree planting ceremony at the U.W. Campbell Primary School in Freeport, Grand Bahama, where over 20 teachers of Guyanese nationality are employed. The President arrived at the school in the company of the Bahamian Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Perry Christie, to a warm reception by students and teachers of the school, whom he urged to designate March 3 as the U.W. Campbell Primary School Tree Planting Day. This, he said, will be a symbol of the solidarity and friendship between the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. The President also visited and toured several industrial sites in Freeport, Bahamas, including the Grand Bahama Shipyard, where he said that the visit to that country has been a learning lesson for Guyana for its future growth and development. At the state dinner at the Hilton Hotel, hosted by Governor General Dame Marguerite Pindling in honor of the President's visit, the Prime Minister, Perry Christie, reiterated Bahamas' emphatic and unequivocal support for Guyana with regard to the Venezuela border controversy. He said, and I quote, "We stand in complete and utter rock-solid solidarity with our brothers from Guyana in their international dispute with their neighbor Venezuela. We have worked with them through CARICOM as much as possible to foster an imitable and equitable resolution to their dispute and will continue to lend our best offices in this regard." On Wednesday evening, President Granger met with Opposition Leader Mr. Bart Jagdeo for a second time in over 2 weeks to discuss the much-talked-about appointment of a new chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. This meeting was a follow-up to one that was held between the two sides on March 1st. Minister of State Mr. Joseph Harmon, Attorney General Mr. Basil Williams, and PPP parliamentarian Mr. Anil Nandlal were also present at the meeting, which was held at State House. In a brief comment after the meeting, Minister Harmon disclosed that Mr. Jagdeo requested clarification with respect to the qualities of the persons to be included on the list. He disclosed that the Attorney General gave a clear explanation as to what, according to the Constitution, was fit and proper.
And His Excellency did elaborate a little bit more on that. He identified the 3 I's, that is to say, the person must be a person of integrity, the person must be a person who is independent, and the person must be someone who is impartial. So those were the 3 issues that were, the 3 qualities that had been identified. But His Excellency, the President, indicated also to the Leader of the Opposition that he's prepared to put his thoughts on this matter down in writing, and he's going to send it to the Leader of the Opposition.
Additionally, the President undertook to prepare a letter outlining the qualities he expects in a nominee. This letter will be sent to the Opposition Leader within a week to further guide his selection process, following which he is expected to submit his new list. Minister Harmon said that while a date for the next engagement with the Opposition Leader has not been fixed, there isn't going to be much delay in concluding this particular issue. On Tuesday, the head of state attended the Full Gospel Fellowship of Churches Apostolic International Leaders Conference at the National Cultural Center. The President has been pushing an information and communication technology agenda. The President went so far as to establish the National Endowment for Science and Technology program, which is geared at providing funding and support for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics initiative.
Let us cooperate for Guyana. Let us cooperate for our land. Let us resolve to comrades. Each man must do his bit for his land. Each must resolve to help another, learn to call his neighbor brother, and we do it, yes we can.
And with that, we've come to the end of this week's program. Thank you for joining me. For regular updates on the Ministry of the Presidency, go to our website, www.motp.gov.gy. Like our Facebook page, Ministry of the Presidency, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at MOTP Guyana. Do have a safe and productive rest of the week. Goodbye.